G'day and welcome back to Kamala GFX, a very special episode of Kamala GFX today, as today this is going to be a vectoring tutorial. Now I originally learned how to vector from the French Mudkip, who has since left the community, and his original video on it has been taken down as I believe he got rid of his channel. Because of this and because a few people in the PokeTuber Discord have been asking myself and others how they vector, I decided to collaborate with a few good friends of mine, being Fiery Dance and Freezelander, to make this video to teach you guys how to vector, of course how we vector, because there's many different ways people can vector. So hopefully through this video we can teach you all the ins and outs in vectoring, and so that you guys can try vectoring yourselves. Feel free to follow on with all of our vectors with your own versions of Photoshop. If you don't have Photoshop, there's a lot of alternatives that work just as well and basically the exact same, so hopefully you're able to follow along. And if you do, feel free to send them to me on Discord or Twitter, or you can send them to Freeze or Fiery Dance on Twitter as well. I'll link them all in the description. A special thank you to them just for helping out with this video. They've been a blast to work with. So before we start, I'll just give a quick summary of what vectoring is. Vectoring uses the pen tool, and don't worry about most of these options on the pen tool. Mainly focus on just the standard pen tool. You have a few other options, but don't worry about those. So every time you click with the pen tool attached, you create an anchor point. And essentially that is where your shape starts to form. And if I place another point, and then we have our second anchor point. From there, if I place another, we start to see the shape form. If I get rid of this one though, you'll see we still have two lines, and you can actually bend these points. So if I take this point and make another point, we then have a bend shape. You can also do this by pressing and dragging that out. However, you can also come in and by alt clicking on a point, you can then drag it to be whatever shape you want it to be. And then once you're finished the shape, then you have a finished shape just like that. And if this is not the curve you want to have, you can again change it like that. Or if you wanted, you can add an anchor point like that. Or if you want to get rid of one, you can just simply tap and get rid of one. So that's essentially the basics of vectoring. You can add, you can bend, you can bend after it's been placed, you can take them away, and you can finish shapes just like that. So that's a simple essentials of vectoring, but now we'll get into vectoring a Turtwig, so I can sort of give you a demonstration of how that's done. When vectoring a Pokemon like this, you notice that there's a lot of different points that you would need to vector. For example, the leaves, the head, the jaw, the top of the head, and the eye. So we'll start with a leaf, as I place 2 points just like this. And now when I like to vector, I would like to finish the line and then I would add stuff to it. So I'll drag this leaf out over here by adding another vector point, and then I'll drag it out over here. And I can actually change how I want the leaf exactly to bend by alt clicking and then alt clicking again and dragging. So I'll just change it to a white color so you don't have a gradient, and I'll add another one over here, and that sort of seems pretty right. So I'll just end off these edges by again alt clicking and just dragging it out a little bit. I'll repeat this process with the other leaf. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to start vectoring the head, and I'll explain how I'm going to do this a bit later, but we're just going to vector the entire head. So I'm going to place a few points and then I'm going to come around and curve this all a little bit later. As you can see here, it's a bit hard for me to place this point as I don't exactly know where it will be, so you can often either lower your opacity or just move it out of the way so you can then move it to where it needs to be easily. And you see, we're just going to start going around the head, smoothing things out. So we'll start at the top, move down to the second anchor point, and we're just going to add another just to thin it down a little bit. Other side looks good. Then we'll go down here and just spread this out a bit. Now you can see I need to actually add another one so the line works a bit better, and I'll have to do the same down here to add two, just so the line obviously works really nicely. And we'll continue that up here. Then we have our final head. Now what we're going to have to do is we're going to make the shape for the jaw and the top of the head, and we'll use clipping masks to finish the whole thing off. So we'll just make the shape of the jaw and we'll make it bigger down the bottom, smooth it out with the vector points, and then we'll do the same for the top of the head, making it big around the corners. Then when we have our three shapes, we're just going to convert them all to 100% opacity again, make the original shape green, second shape nice gold, and our third shape brown. Once that's done, we're just going to convert the green shape to a smart object. You can also do this by just changing the normal color, but I decided to do it with blending options. Then we're going to create a clipping mask which will place the brown and gold over the green very, very nicely. Then we're just going to put the green leaves in place, putting one behind the head and one in front. Then we have the basic start of the twig. From there, we're just going to add some detail using the nostrils. Again, creating a very simple vector. Then we'll do the shading. I'll show you how this is done a little bit later. A little bit of a glow here. It's a bit of sunspot in his head. A little bit of extra detail added to the leaves. And a little bit of shading at the top of the head. And then of course the eye. Here I'm just using the oval tool or the circle tool and customizing it to fit the eye that I need to do. You're able to move shapes, of course, using File, Free Transform, and then editing it however you need to be done. Once that's done, we'll just convert all our images to 100% opacity and we can start using them. Starting with the nostrils, we'll just convert them to a smart object and make them a bit darker green. Then we'll start with the shadow, we'll just make that black, and then we're going to add it to our clipping mask, which will add a little bit of a nice shadow to our face. With this little glare of light, we'll just make a bit lighter colour and add that to the top. Then with this little detail to the leaves, we'll just make it a bit darker, and we'll do the same thing with the shadow at the top that we did to the bottom. Then we'll work on the eye. We'll remove everything so we can see what we're working with. We'll start with the gold colour of the first bit of the eye, moving on to the dark colour, and then followed by the very dark pupil. We're going to add a little bit of a shine with another circle just to add that Pokemon sort of feel to the eye. Once that's done, we have our Turtwig head, which looks really, really nice. So that's how I would vector. Now we're just going to jump over to how Friezlander would vector a Chimchar.
How's it going, guys? Friezlander, and I am here on Bill's channel. He asked me to vector a nice Chimchar head. So let's just get into it. How Bill does it is he places them and then he uses this to adjust the curve or however the fuck he does it. But what I always do is I always use the second point directly to make the curve. And what most people have issues with is then when you place another dot, it automatically creates a line. But the way you remove it is by alt-clicking on the dot itself, and then you can do it in every direction you want possible. But you have to be careful because you want these lines to kind of match. Like these aren't perfectly, but you want them to kind of match because then the line goes on evenly. Because if you don't pay close attention to that, you can have lines like this where you don't want them to be, where you want them to be even. So that's something to be careful. What I always do is I always kind of look at what kind of things I want to vector. Like you have this shade on the Chimchar, which I want to have, of course. So I'm keeping that in mind. There's a nice mouth. And one thing that I noticed from the beginning is there's a little lighter glow on the Chimchar's head. And what I normally do is I normally just vector the entire head, like the main shape, and then I just add the colors onto it with the clipping mask. But that isn't super possible with this Chimchar, considering you want the shadow that's on top of here vectored or clipped on the orange part. So what I'm gonna do instead for this Chimchar is I'm gonna make two main vectors for the ears and the face part, and then another one for the flaming head part, so that you can kind of have those as back. So to be honest, I'm not super picky when it comes to how my shapes are. I always one thing that I always do is I want my shape behind the original layer. So here you can see I wanted initially to make it like this, but if I do that, this part doesn't line up. So you can see it really lines up, and if it does line up, you miss a whole part of the mouth itself. So that most likely comes because this one is a little crooked. If you line them up with the original lines, it's much easier to make nicer looking shapes. Like as you can see right here, I now use the same point, but since this one is a little adjusted, it fits nicely. So we just go from here. I'm not too bothered about colors just yet. I'll add those later. There of course are always different ways to use colors, like you can use gradients. I think it sometimes looks better, sometimes it doesn't. It kind of depends on the situation and where you want to use them for. Like if you have a... also, sometimes it's very difficult to use gradients, I've noticed, or I found out. Now I'm going to focus on the orange part, and what I will do now is actually deselect the original layer. So I can perfectly line up the orange part with the face itself. So as you can see, it perfectly hits on the top part where it goes inwards on the ear. And I'll do that later at this section as well. But first, we need to finish the little turret that it has on top of its head. I know it's a flame, but eventually you'll get very quick at vectoring because it's a very, I guess the pen tool is relatively difficult to master. Not that I'm a master of it, but getting to use it quickly is something that will take time. Since this is behind the original shape, I can just do it like this and finish it off. So now I'm gonna just create the colors already. You always, if you have the back shapes, you always want to use the color that's the most dominant. So it's the orange color in here, and for the first shape, it's probably the color here. I can see that there's a little lighter shadow over here. Of course, the darker shadow is here. I have a feeling this ear is a little lighter. I might just add a little. You don't always have to perfectly go with how it looks. Like you don't have to replicate the original work. Like I see a little white spark here, but I don't really think that if adding that is gonna add anything to it. It's only gonna add more work. So as you see, there's a nice Chimchar head. Let's just finish off the flame first, considering it's the easiest part to finish. So we can just go like this. As I said, clipping tool, Alt clip, make sure the shape is above the other shape. It is like the main shape. So this is like shape 2 is the main shape for the fire top head. So this is going to be the lighter shadow on the thing. Alt click between the layers, or if you don't know how to do that, you can click right click on the shape 3 and then create clipping mask. Does the same thing. You can see it's a clipping mask when the little arrow pops up right next to this thing. And there's another shadow that we have to add, which is right over here. You can see some nice shades. So let's just go for the eyes. Relatively easy. Just go with the full shape, and then we will add the. Now we're gonna add the eye. And also, always keep in mind whether you have to use the clipping mask or not, because clipping masks don't add. Like you cannot add another clipping mask to this clipping mask. Because if you look at the eye, like the dark part of the eye, you don't have to clip, because, or you shouldn't clip the dark part of the eye, because you want this white part clipped, because it kind of, otherwise it does kind of stick out, and this little lighter gray part. Also don't know why Bill asked me to vector an entire face or an entire head. That works for me. I'm not gonna question his sanity. He literally just dyed his hair blue, or half of his hair blue. He didn't go big. He just went home. So I'm guessing this looks fine. Yeah, the eye looks fine. You can see that this is now all clipped. These three are now all clipped to the original eye, which you don't have to clip. And if you do clip it, like you can see what I mean, these things will stick out, which you normally want clipped to the original eye. So now let's do the other eye quickly. I know it's a little more clicking, but you'll get the hang of it. I'll believe in you. If you do listen to this, look at my YouTube channel as well. Also, you can commission me if you want some nice vector Chimchar heads. Considering I only have to do these ears, and I only have to do the ears, the shadow here. Now looking at it, I kind of want to finish the shadow on this face part first, because if I finish that, I can just work with the rest. So, something that I might try is do these things really quickly at some point. Oh. Now we're gonna do this ear part, and what I want the ear part to line up with is this little corner. Like you always want to hit the corners, like kind of make this distinguishable corners where you want to align the other parts with. So I make the nice distinguishable corner at this part of the ear. For this part it doesn't matter a whole lot. So now I can work from this part of the ear, and it will perfectly align with the shadow that's on the face already. And now we only need to finish up with the mouth. Also, something that I feel gives a little more dynamic to vectors is, even if it is a straight line, just give it a slight curve. Like over here, just give it a slight curve, you know. Look at that thing. How adorable. Now we can also add the teeth. Teeth? Teeth? Teeth. Teeth. Teeth? Teeth? Teeth. And the beautiful thing about vectoring is always that what a vector does, it doesn't set pixels. It's not a rasterized shape. Because if you now select everything, what I always like to do is, if I'm finished a certain part of a body, like in this type of face, I just put it in a folder. And you can just scale it out. I think this is a 2000 by 2000 piece canvas. And now it's a nice vector Chimchar. You can see the lines, like the pixels, aren't blurry because it's a shape. So here's a nice Chimchar. This is how I vector. I don't know how Bill does it. I don't know what's gonna do with the video. If you enjoyed this, be sure to drop a like on this video on Bill, and he will hopefully put the link to my video in his description.
What's up guys, I'm Fiery Dance, and Bill asked me to show you guys how I vector. So I'm going to be vectoring just ahead of this Piplup. Let's get into the tutorial. I like to use gradients a lot, so I usually take the lightest colour and the darkest colour, and I trace around the black outline. That should be good. Let's put it to 100 opacity. And let's go to fill, gradient, and let's select the gradient. And here we have the darker color up the top and the lighter color down the bottom, which is what I do not want. So let's press this, which will just swap them around. So now the lighter color is up the top and the darker color is at the bottom. Next I'm going to be doing this white bit here, which is simple. It's again just tracing around the black border, and if you make a mistake, don't worry, you can just press Ctrl-Alt-Z to go back a step. So let's get the two colors, the white and the darker white, light grey, and let's go to fill, the gradient, and let's select the gradient we want. So that's done. We want to turn this layer back on, and right click on shape 2 and select create clipping mask, and let's create a new layer, and let's do the eye. So we grab the dark color and the lighter color, and again we just trace over the eye. There we go. We have the darker color on top. And let's do the black bit of the eye, the pupil. There we go. And we're not going to make it a perfect oval because this white bit here is going to be covering it. There we go. The eye is done. And let's do this light blue part here. And because there is no darker blue, we just use that solid color. And let's drag it under shape 2. Turn on shape 1. This is what we have so far. Almost done. So all we need to do is the beak. That's done. And it's blue, so again, shape color, gradient. Oops. So we turn it off because it looks like I forgot to select the dark color, or I selected it in the same swap. So we select the dark color. We use this to flip it, and we're almost done. You trace it. Again, it's going to be clipping masked. Yep. And what I like to do is I like to go to blending options and flick through them until I find a good one. So at the end, what I usually go for is soft light, which I will keep at this point. And there we go. We've successfully vectored the head of a Piplup.
And so there we have the 3 different ways to vector. You will notice that Frieslander and Fiery Dancer's style is quite similar, however one uses gradients, one uses solid color, and I use putting dots in and then moving them together. But either way, thank you guys for sticking through this entire video. It is a bit long, but hopefully you've learned a lot. If you have any further questions about vectoring or anything Photoshop related, feel free to DM any of us. We're all quite active on Twitter and Discord, so check us out there. Thank you guys very much for watching, and adios.